Welcome everyone to my channel, The Grim Reader. I am Kathy Grimm, The Grim Reader, and I'm here for a, what should I call it, live and books update. So 2026 has already been off to a bit of a rough start in the sense that I had another bout of my, basically, I don't know, illness, sickness. But what's interesting, so it's digestive in nature, but I think it's also more than that. I think it's the way these bouts happen. This one in particular happened with such strong body aches that I was reminded of the fact that in 2014 I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, like not even just fibro, but full on deep pain, and it lasted for a while, and then I had the digestive stuff. Pain and other stuff that that I had back in September, and so it was bad, and I always have to sort of completely go off every food and just not eat. And I went to see the doctor and we got some tests done, and then I actually found out that I have one marker of that I was pretty inflamed. CRP is what it's called. But what happened was, since she didn't get back to me, I don't know why, I guess she didn't see it. I went to see, I got in with a new GI doc, so gastroenterologist, but he was not so helpful in the sense that he dismissed any kind of connection between, he thought that my marker for inflammation was, because I mentioned RA and maybe I shouldn't have, he's like, oh, that's all RA, that's nothing to do with your gut. I'm like, you sure? Because it seems there's a bit of a connection, at least in terms of timing and the fact that I went from one sort of issue to the other. Anyway, he was dismissive, and maybe because he's just a GI guy and he's not really, it's sort of like he was saying, oh, go see the RA person for that stuff, which is one of the main issues with, I'm sure, people who have multiple things, chronic things. It's like people who are very siloed off in their own little specialties and who refuse. I mean, isn't it pretty basic right now? Isn't it like everyone's talking about the gut biome and the connection of inflammation, chronic inflammation to that, and leaky gut stuff. Apparently, that's what I think I'm leaning towards right now, is that it's to do with. But the thing is, with me, the question is, well, what starts these bouts, quite debilitating bouts of pain and digestive pain, so body aches and then digestive pain, sort of almost like diverticulitis, as I imagine it would be. And I don't know. But I'm coming out of it with the help of some meds, and so that's good. And it sort of has passed. But the problem is, I think I will need to make some dietary changes and be stricter about them. The looming one is I shouldn't drink at all, probably, any more alcohol, which is hard for me. And am I an alcoholic? No. Do I like a glass of wine with dinner? Yes. And over Thanksgiving, no, New Year's Eve, I even indulged in one, what do you call it? Martini. I had a martini. I love martini. I don't have them hardly ever. I had a dirty martini. I like the idea of them, and I just like salty things. Point being, no more martinis for me, and perhaps even not much wine at all. But it's really hard to just go off it completely. I mean, maybe I should for my health. I mean, I probably should, because it's poison or toxic or whatever. So yeah, but I'm willing to try and do a lot of like reining in of the sugar and all that stuff, and just try and eat better. And also for me, of course, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I don't move enough. I am very, very sedentary because I'm tired, because I've gone over and over that before. And that was another thing about this one. This made me super tired, this bout. I was really quite fatigued. So, but anyway, the good news is it's only one more semester of teaching, but it's been interesting to me to have this break. And even my doctor was like, well, but you're on break, why are you sick? And it's like, oh, that's not really quite how it works. I mean, even when I got the rheumatoid many years ago, that was also in the winter break. It's as if it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm immediately better. It does mean that I'm less stressed, which is good. It's a good beginning. And I have a feeling it'll all change again when I'm completely retired. So just annoying, and it takes you out of your normal regular life, and that's both annoying, but it's also kind of interesting. I do like trying to take on an observer role of what's going on with my body and with my life, and how everything changes when you're really quite ill, when in terms of your priorities, in terms of like, I was trying to prioritize sleep a lot and get to bed early, but when I was really in the throes of this illness, it was more like just being comfortable, because sleep was sort of like not that easy anyway. So it's more just like being distraction so that you're comfortable, as opposed to sticking to a strict schedule. And I noticed how when you're ill, and I couldn't sort of any of the quota stuff that I've been having, like the days and nights, time, your relationship to time is different when you're very chronically ill, because it's more about you are more thrown to the present. You can't really think about much about the future, because you're still sort of struggling with dealing with getting through the present in a certain sense. So, and that did affect my reading in the sense that it was really hard to focus on anything and get in. So I'd finished the Zola, which took me a long time. I don't know how much I've said about it before. I apologize. I think I have kind of already talked about how it was really, really good. I talked about it for no, it didn't make it into the best, because this is already this year. So The Conquest of the Plaisance is, I don't know which one in this long cycle of novels that I'm reading and enjoying, and probably the one I've enjoyed the most, just because it was wacky how the characters, I'm really kind of wondering how much I've already spoken about it. But let me just say, and apologies if you've heard this one before, as Morrissey says in one of his songs. So what happens is this creepy priest comes in, and quasi takes over this family in this town, and so it's like the fall of the family. They're pretty powerful family, even though the husband's silly from the get-go, but he's quite well off and powerful, and they're connected to the basic families of the whole 20 novels. They both are sort of. And then you sort of see the family sort of sink down, and then these newcomers, including the priest and his sort of entourage, come in, and it's all quite well done. But it's sort of the one of the main characters is the mother and her relationship to the priest, because they have a kind of very strange, slightly eroticized relationship. Well, not even slightly, but it's not fulfilled. It's also connected to her kind of masochism and his misogynist kind of looking down on women. And so yeah, the downfall of the one family and the rise of the other, and then of course the unraveling at the end, which is fascinating and really well done, and quite an exciting read for a strange book. I highly recommend it. Of the ones I've read so far, I mean, they've all been good in different ways, but this was really, really quite entertaining. The books, I started a couple of books that I really wanted to get to, the top of my TBR. I have a lot of TBR books on my TBR, and one of them was The Secret Service by Wendy Walker. This fascinating, modern, quite new, modern for me for sure, 1992, so for me that's modern, sort of off the radar novel by this modernist writer. She's connected to groups of writers in New York, I think, who do sort of experimental fiction, and I had heard about the plot of this on Leaf by Leaf and thought, wow, that's right up my alley. And it's basically about a group of people does she give a year ever? I get an 18th century or 19th century, 18th in a way more than 19th, but I don't even know if there are any dates in here, because it's sort of a fantasy parallel world to the 18th or 19th, although it is supposed to be England, I guess. And so this group of people, kind of a superhero group in a certain sense, are able to become, through apparently has to do with magic land and stuff. And she actually spends, which I do appreciate, that she spends a lot of time trying to explain what happens. And what they can do is that they can become parts of a service. They can become glasses, and one of them becomes a rose. So their whole bodies get sort of decomposed and then transformed into these objects that then can then exert a sort of hypnotic power on certain people that they're trying to spy on, because they're a spy gang group, and all the people are fascinating in it. And I have started it, I'm already telling you a little bit about it, but I did find it hard going for my poor illness-addled brain, which just wasn't up to the task for this pretty erudite, and there were words I had to look up, and the writing is the aspects are sort of skewed or interesting. It's not that hard. I was looking, it's like, why did I have such a hard time with it? And I just don't quite know why. So I put it aside for now, but I really think it's a great book if your brain is up for it. Like I think because of my illnesses and stuff and just tiredness, fatigue, my brain wasn't up to it at this point. And so what would happen is that I still was clinging to the idea of wanting to read it, but I wasn't reading it, but I didn't start anything else. Well, there is one thing I started, but I'll get to that in a minute. And so I wasn't reading, and that's frustrating when you kind of like, I haven't really given up on one yet, but you haven't started the other one. I was in that in-between space. But I have set it aside for now, but I still think I want to read it at some point. The in-between book was a strange experiment that I decided to do. Well, not strange, but I just did it. I looked at I wanted to sort of have I looked at what the number one book was on the New York Times bestseller list, and I decided to read it. And it was The Housemaid, I think is what it's called. And it's been turned into a Netflix movie. And what's the writer's name? McFadden? Someone with F, Frida McFadden. So if you know, it's this tale that to me read like a pretty mediocre, silly Netflix show of the thriller type, so creepy backstory, identity type stuff, and then it does involve bad stuff happening where they lock people up in a room for a little bit. And the housemaid is this person who, and the backstory of everyone is very sort of sketchy and unsatisfyingly sketched in just to move the plot along. Like, this person is supposed to have been in jail for 10 years, so she's sort of, that's part of her, I don't know. And then like the people that hire her, it's all very, very flimsy in terms of being plausible, I guess is what I'm saying. And then the writing was, I did read the whole thing, and I did notice, because I'm always going on about how slow I am as a reader. Well, part of it is that I choose books like this, and I want to read them slowly, or even Zola, I read him quite slowly. But this one I read in 2 half days, so basically one day on my Kindle. And it's the kind of book where you could just read it that way, and I think I got most of the plot out of it. There's no point in dwelling on any of it. And so I read The Housemaid, and it was fine, but then it threw me into this sort of pit of why even bother with counting our books, because the difference between something like this or even Zola and that, it's really apples and oranges. Of course you can read that kind of stuff if you wanted to. You could read one of them every day of the year, and then you have 365 books. But why would I want to do that to myself? There's no way I would want that. It really was like watching TV, and I guess. But it wasn't really that enjoyable. Like, it wasn't like a candy bar that you eat and you feel sort of, what is it? A bad comfort food type thing. It wasn't that enjoyable for me to, I think there's probably other stuff that's of, that kind of very popular variety that I would enjoy more. But I don't really want to spend time looking for it. It was just an experiment. And I was thinking maybe we'd try and read other ones. There's a book somewhere on there called The Conversation. But no, not right now. And then now a short comment also on an author, and I am going to alienate some people here, but I really just, it gives me such pause when I hear people lauding this writer who I really think is just a hack. I just don't think is good at all, and that's Fredrik Backman. I know so many people love his works, and the only one I listened to was A Man Called Over. It was terrible. I mean, it's tripe. I'm sorry. It's cliched, overwritten. I just don't. I'm sorry if you like him. And so I again and again people are holding up these books and saying how great they are, and I'm like, no, they're not. They're not. They're not. They're not. They're not. I'm sorry. I mean, even The Housemates to me is preferable to Bachman. There's something about the sentimental, cheesy, and I don't know. I just don't like it. I'm sorry. I really just don't like it. I know he's beloved, but he's the one that. Why do people like him? I'm sorry. I apologize. I'll get off my snooty high horse, whatever. But I'll try and be inclusive, but no, I can't. I cannot do it. So I put that aside. I was thinking about reading Hild, a novel that I'm sure I would enjoy, but that was also kind of like, not really doing it for me right now. And then in the meantime, I've always wanted to read Jean Sand, just because she was so prolific in her and such an influential writer in her day. And so I found an audio, it's like an old lady voice audio. She's sort of pedantic in the way she reads it, but I'm sticking with it and reading this. And now I know why there aren't many of these in this Oxford World's Classics, even though she published so much, because she's a pretty terrible writer, to be honest. She's an overwriter. I still prefer her, I just was ranting about Bachman, but I like her better than him, but only because it's sort of old-timey overwritten, but it's pretty bad writing. The prose is like pretty awful. There are aspects of the plot that are mildly interesting, as so it focuses on this poor woman, Indiana, and her maid, but then mainly just her, and it's all about how she's not in a happy marriage. Her husband's terrible, and the guy who she sort of falls in love with is pretty bad too. And he sort of falls in and out of love with her the whole time. And then there is a sort of brother in the background, a relative who's her savior, and he's a good guy, but he's very he hemmed in terms of his emotions. And there's a lot of sort of speechifying in terms of character, and there are aspects of the fact that sort of the nuanced depiction of how she feels about the other guy who's her non-lover, but not her husband, but wants to be her lover, that kind of thing. There's the triangle aspect, and how, let me see if I can think about how to say this, like her standing in society and how she will be perceived and all that kind of stuff, which is interesting. One thing I'm having a hard time with is the fact that it's 1831, I think, and it just sounds like it sounds very 18th century to me, like 1700. Like it's sort of reminiscent of Clarissa, which I loved because I thought the writing was really good. And this is like bad 18th century stuff, even though it's from the 19th century. It has a sort of very old-fashioned feel to it, and so. Yeah, no, so I don't know what's going on with, I don't know why, well, I do kind of know why people read her. I think part of what's going on is that she was just sort of, a bestseller in her day. So now whenever in Trollope they mention people reading French novels, this is what I'm going to think of. They're reading George Sand, perhaps, sort of schlocky, overwritten, romantic stuff. And I'm so glad. I still want to finish it and see what happens to poor Indiana. Another aspect of it, the sort of colonial aspect, is that she and her maid are both Creoles, except she's a sort of, her connection to the island of Bourbon, which is, what's it now called? It starts with it's a little island near Madagascar. Something, I forget what it's called. But they're both from there, and they actually go back there. Henry James admired her. Interesting. I mean, there's interesting stuff even in the speechifying to a certain degree, but then it just didn't kind of. It's still not very good. The writing is just not. It's overwritten is the main thing. She overstates everything, and it's also extremely wordy. Like she needs an editor or something. It's just typical of bad writing of that kind of overwritten, overly romantic way that people sometimes wrote. Yeah, the Creole aspect, and her poor maid, who was actually Creole, from there, not just of from there, but French parentage, whatever. She's sort of, she is removed from the novel pretty early on in a kind of sad way. Yeah, it's a strange work, and I have one other Song novel, but I have a feeling that's going to be it. I'm still interested in her as a sort of entity, but yeah, now I understand why there aren't that many. She's not. There's not sort of every one of her books are not have not been republished, because it's like, who's going to read them? They're not that good. Sorry, Jocelyn. Maybe there are some that are better. I don't know. You tell me if you know. And so now we come to the book that I'm reading now. I have decided, I just have fallen into a sort of strange choice. I know I wanted to read Alexis, is it right? Praiseworthy. And so now instead of that, I'm reading something not Indigenous at all, but it's still Australian, namely this book that I had on my shelf, which I think is a beautiful little chunky thing, by Patrick Wright, the Australian Nobel-winning writer from the 20th century. What's it called? Riders in the Chariot. And I've just started reading it. It's about strange people in suburbs of, I guess, Sydney or Australia, some town in Australia. And it's just, he's such a good writer, but he's easier to take than whatever, the hard ones that I show you. I've fallen into how he's talking about these, he's introducing the characters to us and their backstories. And the only other book I read of his was Foss, which I absolutely adored. It's one of my favorite works that I've read since I kind of came back to reading, sort of. And so I did start another one, that's right, The Eye and the Storm, and that was about a lady who, she wasn't very likable, and she was on her deathbed, and it was good, but it was a little depressing, sort of. It was kind of just in one room, and there's this lady's thoughts. But this one, I think, is going to... And I also like the idea of a chunky book that's still pretty easy for me to hold on to. This is from 1961, by the way. And it will be my semester book, because I'm such a slow reader. But I'll read a little bit every day and more on the weekends. And I really feel kind of... It's soothing and calming me down to have a book like this that will sustain me over the course of the last semester that I teach. I still have my other big books that I was trying to read a little bit every day. That has fallen off too, but maybe I'll try and come back to it. The Peter Weiss and the Margaret Young. But I think I'm going to stop here because it's already 22 minutes and I have babbled. I hope things are somewhat entertaining. I don't know how to feel about talking about my illnesses, because it's sort of, they're hard to describe how, because it's sort of overlapping things, digestion and autoimmune, and do I have RA or is it fibromyalgia, and I don't know. All I know is that I'm feeling better, and I'm glad I got sick before the semester started, and hopefully I won't get sick again. I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching and hearing me talk about everything. I hope everyone's doing well, and I do dip into watching videos now and then, but yeah, so I will talk to you soon. Bye.